All right, so welcome to today's episode of Teaching Others What I Myself Need to Learn. And so I'm your host, Scott Engler, published author and specialist on LinkedIn professional branding, career development, business development, and job search strategies. So today is going to be, as the title suggests, the best interview I had ever had and how I didn't get that job. So this is a special podcast for me because this is actually based on the very first article I ever wrote that was published on a platform. And I think it was probably the very first article that I'd ever wrote, because I remember I had to get it into a certain word count, which I'd never done before. So let's get back to the podcast, but it is a special one for me. This was really one of the biggest, if not the biggest, transformation for me in my own lengthy job searching days, particularly after and during graduate school back in 2008 when the economy was tanking. So just to back up, I didn't have the hardest time interviewing in the past, but what I found was the more I kept getting rejected, and I'm talking about when my search really started for my career, and even during grad school, just interviewing for menial jobs to get in the meantime, I just felt like I couldn't get a job to save my life. I was too overqualified. I was not qualified enough. I mean, it was just like I couldn't do any right, it felt like. And so it shook me, and one thing that I learned at an earlier age was to research the company, learn a little bit more about the company for the interview you're going in for. And I think most people do that to some extent and have been taught that. What I hadn't thought of, per se, and I started doing, was researching the person who was going to be interviewing me. So the reason this is a little more challenging is, I was never taught that. It just was an idea I had, and I kind of ran with it. But the other thing is you kind of have to figure out who's going to be interviewing you, right? So there's a little bit of a proactive approach there versus, obviously, I'd hope you would know who the company is that you're interviewing with. So long story short, what I've found is that job interviewing at its best is a conversation. And what I myself had struggled with, and so many people did, other people I know, is we give all the control and power over to the person interviewing us, especially if we've been struggling for a while, right? We haven't been able to find a job, we need a job. We give them all the power, let them ask all the questions, let them just be completely in charge and feel that way. So the truth is that we have just as much say in the job as they do, because we can reject it or accept it. And that's something that most of us forget, right? Is we don't have to take the job, and sometimes it feels like we're desperate and we have to take it. But the truth is we still have a choice. Now, the reason that this was the best interview and what I did differently was I had decided again to research the person that was interviewing me. So I went on, I think it was probably LinkedIn, and I looked up her name and her profile, and I just was looking at her background and schools she went to and what she was about. And I think I might have gotten a few tidbits, but then I remember looking at the company website, and I think she was the clinical director. This is when I was a marriage and family therapist. So I'm pretty sure she was the clinical director. So obviously they had a nice bio on her, and I remember reading that she liked this certain type of yoga. It's called Kundalini yoga, that I had just started taking in San Diego. It was, I had done yoga before, but this was this other variation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just took that yoga for the first time like 2 weeks ago, and it was awesome. So I knew that about her, and I was like, oh wow, that's really cool, because it was kind of, I didn't know anybody else that had done Kundalini yoga before. And so when I went into the interview, I had said something to the effect, and again, it's more about putting yourself in the mindset of a conversation and reading the energy. So of course, what happened in my experience, I just want to clarify beforehand, isn't always going to be the case, isn't always necessarily going to be the best thing. But I think if you set the intention to have a back and forth exchange and conversation to see if the person you are going to be working under or working with the most, if you guys have the similar ideals and values and can kind of connect that way, is a great start. And so learning something about the person as a human being, right? Because they are just, after all, a human, and is a really powerful way to go. So anyway, back to the story. I mentioned, like maybe in the first couple minutes, I said, hey, you know what? I thought it was so interesting because I went on the website and just learning more about the company, and I was reading your bio. And you said that you were really into Kundalini yoga, and I just told her, I said, I just literally took it for the first time 2 weeks ago in Encinitas, and it was awesome, and I've been going, I went last week too, and she's like, oh my God, isn't it the greatest? And I was like, yeah, I love it, blah, blah, blah. And then somehow we got started talking. I think it was on my resume how I went on semester at sea, and then she was like, what was that like? And she was like asking me about it. And she was like, wow, like, that's so amazing. And she was saying how, I guess, her daughter was about to go to college, and she was single parent. So she was like, I've always wanted to go on a ship. And I swear it was like probably the first 20 minutes of our interview was like that, just sharing each other and as human beings and connecting and really establishing a good organic kind of rapport. The truth is, had I not started with the Kundalini thing, it probably wouldn't have gone that way. And I joke, but it's true. I actually was the one that redirected the conversation, and I don't know how I did it. It was in the moment, but I redirected the conversation to like, shoot, like, hey, maybe we should get to the interview. And I definitely said it more respectfully, and I forgot obviously it was years ago, but I just remember me being the one to kind of have to like nudge at, hey, we should probably start talking about the job sometime soon, because we both got to, get on with our day. But the interview, I just remember the feeling. After we had that conversation, the interview went so much smoother. It almost felt like I was talking to somebody I knew, and they were just like trying to explain a job to me. If you ever like talk to a friend and you've known them for a while or something, and then they got a new job or something, and you're like, well, what's that like? It's like, it almost felt like that. Like we had connected in such a way that I was like, oh, okay, cool. This sounds great. Yeah, that sounds, like this place I worked at, how is it going here? And we were really just able to have a very engaging conversation about the job and what it entailed and what my experience was like. I felt so much more at ease and relaxed. I know she did too. There was just this really nice, relaxed energy in the room. And I can't tell you how important that is for everybody, because the truth is, most people aren't good at job interviewing. The second most important thing to remember, not everybody's good at interviewing other people. And so when you have this stiff, nervous energy in the room, both people are likely to not be their best selves and drop their guard down. So they're operating, what I believe, at like a lower energy level. And that's why, there's so many great candidates that probably don't get jobs, because they're responding or reacting to a more, stiff energy in the room. And so the thing with this was it was really one of the most powerful ways I ever experienced just how much of a difference that made in this instance. And it was as a result of me doing the research of the person and the company beforehand. So basically, we had a great conversation. It sounded like, something that I would have been a good fit for based on my experience. She seemed like she'd be a great person to work with. And the funniest thing is that I didn't get that job. Now, I don't remember, why specifically. I don't think I ever got a reason. I think that she just said that, I think that somebody had called me and just said they went with somebody that was a better fit for the job. But the interesting part is, so I say it's the best job interview I ever had and how I didn't get hired. Because it really was up until that point. And then my interviews continued to be amazing. Like I've, if anyone's read any of my other articles or not, there was job interviews where I actually took on positions that I didn't even interview for and that weren't even jobs because of the relationship I had built with the owner or person by doing these same types of principles. The second thing that I want to mention is that the irony is when I wrote my first book, The Job Interview, which I mentioned this interview in it as like interviewing tips, she emailed me back. I sent out like an email to all my Gmail connections. This lady I had met one time in my life emailed me back probably 2 years later. Scott, that's so incredible. Da 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 da. It seems like you're always doing something interesting and new and exciting. I really admire that. Now, mind you, of all the places I've ever interviewed, of all the people she's ever interviewed, for her to feel that connected to me, to reach out. We spoke once for an hour in our lives, and we've actually kept in touch. In fact, over the years, I sent her, when I wrote this article, I sent it to her, and I said, hey, by the way, that's about you. And I forgot what she said. She was like floored. She's like, oh my gosh, I so greatly enjoyed meeting you as well. I forgot why she said that they went with another candidate. It was almost like she felt bad. I was like, hey, don't worry about it. It made for a great story. I think it worked out for the best, because if you would have hired me, I probably would have never wrote my first book or this article. So, and I honestly forgot the reason. It wasn't anything about me. It was more about like, I don't know, I think they hired internally or something. I honestly don't remember. But the more important part is we've had this connection, and even how many years later? So it's been 5 years now. She even emailed me. She's emailed me sporadically. Scott, I love what you're doing on LinkedIn or something. This is so great. And then she even emailed me earlier, it was either this year, 2017, or late last year, telling me that she was looking into, leaving the mental health area and was thinking about going to more her own business, and she wanted to chat with me. Now, I emailed her back. I don't know why I didn't hear back, but like, my point is this was an interview I had 5 years ago now, and 1 hour. And by doing this, something differently that I said really might have been the biggest transformation in my own job search interviewing process, was just learning about the person, having a conversation, establishing a rapport, and really when it made sense to connect in that way. Now, you're not always going to find out, like, it's not, trust me, I've had other interviews where it's not necessarily going to be perfectly timed where she just happens to take some special yoga class. But there's plenty of other ways you could do it. The college you went to, maybe you have a cousin that went there. There's plenty of things you could find. And, if you're not aligned, you can't find anything, that's fine. You don't have, like, I'm not suggesting, like, I definitely don't recommend like stalking them, but just like, just to go on public information, which we have access now to just establish a rapport. And so what I found is that when I've been able to do that, when I've seen what their company mission is, when I see what they've done in their career, maybe they've written a few books, and maybe I want to glance at them, or articles, and I could see their blogs and just see what they're passionate about, and to see if what I'm passionate about really resonates. And so that's really what transformed and shifted my whole job searching days for good. So thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. Until next time, take care.